All right, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for being patient while we wait for the last people to come in. So welcome. This is our first workshop of the day. Thank you for coming. My name is Amanda. I'm an AmeriCorps Fellow at the City of San Jose. This workshop is called the Green Home Renovations and Rebates, and we'll be discussing the benefits of zero net carbon buildings. Initially, we were going to do cards for questions. I think we're just going to do it more organically. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, and then if that becomes an issue, then we'll swap over. But for now, organically is fine. So I'm super excited to introduce Ann Edminster as our trainer. Ann is a leading international expert on efficient green homes. She has chaired the Green Building Task Force for the U.S., Canada, and Mexico's Commission for the Environmental Cooperation, and led the development of LEED for Homes for the U.S. Green Building Council. In 2013, she was named Affordable Comfort, Inc.'s First Woman of the Year. Please give a round of applause to Ann.
Thanks, Amanda. By the way, I always laugh when I hear Affordable Comfort. So Affordable Comfort's an organization that's since morphed to another name and merged with other organizations, but they've been involved in making homes more efficient for a long, long time. And they started out mostly based in the Midwest and Northeast, and I've been to a number of their conferences. And one day I was driving up 101 near SFO, and I saw a marquee and it said, Affordable Comfort, and I thought, they're having a conference here? And I didn't know? How can that happen? And then about a quarter mile or a heartbeat past, I was like, oh, duh. They're talking about beds. Which is, I had always joked with them, it's like, you guys, that's a terrible name for an organization, because it sounds like cheap motel beds. They got me. Anyway, so if you were wondering, like, Affordable Comfort, like, nice, yeah. Woman of the Year, what does that mean? Anyway, it's all about energy efficiency, not about cheap beds. So, good to see you all here this morning. Thank you so much for coming. Oops, clicking a little too fast. Ugh. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. What's a zero carbon home? Upgrading to electric, making a transition plan, because probably most people aren't going to wave a magic wand and do it all at once. And then some sort of practical steps to the actual process of implementation. So we're work through, and I'm used to being able to see a screen, so pardon me while I crane my neck to see what I'm actually talking about. Okay, first of all, the definition of a zero carbon home. Thanks. Can you guys actually hear me? Can you hear me okay without? Okay, all right, I'll use it then. Let's see, will I click with my right and mic with my left, or we'll see what works best. Now, can you hear, everybody hear me okay? All right, great, thank you. Okay, so zero carbon home means three things, really. So zero emissions on site, and then electric demand met by clean energy sources. So the third part really is, where does that clean energy come from, clean electricity? It can be either on site or off site. And so I'm going to walk through each of these things in a little more detail, but just wanted to start with the basic premise. So we're getting all fossil fuel burning objects out of our homes to create a cleaner future. And some of the backdrop to this, I imagine on average, most of you here are probably quite well informed about the policy landscape, but just in brief, shortly before he left office, Governor Brown made a number of things happen, waved his magic wand, if you will, and two of the really key measures were putting in place the policy framework to have a 100% clean electricity grid by 2045, and then an executive order saying that we would be a climate neutral state by 2045. And you may wonder, well, what's the difference? The difference is 100% clean electricity grid does nothing about our fossil fuel emissions, right? So there's a gap between what happens with electricity and then how we operate economy-wide. And so the reason we're talking about electrifying homes is because fossil fuel consumption in residential construction is a big part of the delta between clean electricity and a clean economy. So obviously there are other parts to that, transportation industry and so forth, but residences are a big part of it. And in our part of the country, the vast majority of homes are dual fuel, so natural gas and electricity. So we'll test that hypothesis here for a moment. How many of you are in dual fuel homes? How many are you not in dual fuel homes? One. There we go. That's a pretty accurate snapshot, I think, for our area. So are you in a single family or multifamily? Ma'am? Multifamily. Yeah, see, that's much more typical to be all electric and multifamily because it's a little bit easier from an infrastructure perspective to put all electric and multifamily, or has been historically, and also because heating loads tend to be lower with shared wall and floor surfaces, and so there's not as much of a utility cost hit for heating with electricity in multifamily residence. Whereas with single family, with all those surfaces exposed to the elements, that's a lot more heat loss and therefore a higher heating expense, which is one of the reasons historically we've had a lot of natural gas heating. It's been our cheaper fuel. Another piece of the policy landscape, I'm just straying a little bit from my topic here, but I think context is really important. We will be seeing pretty steep increases in natural gas prices in the years to come, because with the necessary electrification that goes with the clean energy economy, it means that the costs of maintaining that infrastructure are going to be spread across a smaller population. So it's going to become less and less advantageous financially to be on natural gas and more advantageous to be on electricity. So I'll say a little bit more about the economics later. Yes?
Isn't it true that electric costs are really on par with natural gas even now? And then natural gas also has a bit of a tax subsidy vis-a-vis the way the local communities handle their taxes and do natural gas.
The question was about natural gas having a tax subsidy. I don't know the answer to that question, and whether electric service and natural gas are actually more comparable. Not so much. There are some factors that we'll walk through a little bit that can help to equalize that, but no, on sort of a per unit of energy basis, natural gas is definitely cheaper right now. So again, because we can flip some of the efficiencies with electric devices, we can start to change that equation. And again, we're going to see some changes in utility rate structures over the next few years, which will also change that. Okay, I'm just gonna cruise right along here. Okay, so besides the economic picture, which as I said is somewhat mixed in the immediate horizon, there are a lot of benefits to going all electric, sort of beyond the climate benefits. So indoor air quality, and when we get to the section on induction cooking, I will talk a bit more about this. Fire safety, similarly, these are both really related principally to the switch from natural gas to electric cooking. Avoided gas price increases, I alluded to that. Resale value, so net zero energy, or net zero carbon rather, achieved with on-site solar, we do see about a 4% value increase in homes that have solar. And of course, new construction starting in January will be required to have solar. Not true for those of you who are electrifying existing homes. But nevertheless, if you're in a position to sell that home later, you will see some value from that. And then equipment improvements. In general, the electric replacements for natural gas appliances are typically going to be quieter, more efficient, and more reliable. And again, you see the natural gas emissions will be eliminated and resulting in a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a happy bit. Okay, so that's kind of the what is it. Now let's look at the electric options, sort of one by one. So really, ideally, we think of the whole house as a system and work out a systemic type plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. That's easier to do with new construction, a little more challenging with an existing home, which is why we're sort of picking it apart and looking at each piece. So for space heating, right now, I'm guessing many of you have electric, of course, air conditioning and natural gas heating. How many of you is that not true for? So a few. Is that because you don't have air conditioning?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Do you wish you did?
Sometimes.
Yeah, right? And probably increasingly year by year.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So how many of you who have these systems, those systems are maybe not brand new? So they may be getting ripe for replacement. Well, the good news is that if you're replacing these aged ACs and natural gas furnaces, you can replace both systems with a single system, a heat pump, which both heats and cools. And if you're replacing only the heating system and you replace it with a heat pump, you'll then have both heating and cooling capacity. So at not necessarily a cost premium. So that's a really excellent benefit of these systems. So there are two basic flavors of heat pumps. What's called a mini split heat pump. The split just refers to the fact that the compressor and the air handler are two different boxes located at different places in the home. And then a standard heat pump, which is typically bigger. And really the main difference is how much load are they serving? In other words, how hard do they have to work to heat or cool the building? And that's a function of both the size of the building and how well insulated and air sealed the building is. And so you can see there's a pretty wide spread, cost-wise, for these systems, whether small or large. In either case, it might be relatively inexpensive or have a fairly hefty price tag. And again, a lot of that is just how big is the house, how leaky is the house.
And what size are you assuming for the $1,000 fiber? How many tons?
Yeah, so that would probably be like a 3/4 ton mini split. So with a relatively easy installation process. We have voices, poltergeist, yes.
Are there the threesome heat pumps where they do heating, cooling, and hot water in one unit?
A heat pump water heater will do that, but not, these are air source heat pumps. So air source heat pumps don't heat the water. So we'll get to heat pump water
You can't buy
heaters.
2 units, you can't buy 1 unit and do
No.
all 3 things.
There's one unit available by standard. There's only one company and one lot.
And they're very expensive.
Right, yeah, so we'll probably see a little bit more opportunity in that area, but that's not standard right now, yes.
The 3/4 ton mini split heat pump that you mentioned for good for efficient homes, what would be the square footage that you would call for?
If you were gonna heat and cool a home with 3/4 ton mini split, it's completely a function, largely a function of how well, again, it's insulated and air sealed. If it's really well insulated and air sealed, you could conceivably space condition a home even 3,000 square feet without, if you can achieve the distribution properly. With a ducted unit, you're gonna have to deal with ducts and grills and so forth, and so that's not gonna be the least expensive installation. But it can be done. We actually have pilot projects even in Redding, which is a pretty extreme climate for California, that are larger homes using a 3/4 ton, yes.
Is it possible to reuse your furnace ducts? If you have a furnace, a portion?
Yeah, a good question is, can you reuse your furnace ducts? Sometimes. Some older duct systems are actually pretty well constructed. They're pretty airtight and deliver air pretty efficiently. Others, not so much so. So that's a classic, it depends question, right? It's really, it's gonna take an experienced HVAC person, sorry, acronym alert, heating, ventilating, air conditioning is HVAC in the industry, to really assess the condition of the system. And there's probably a trade-off because they may not be efficiently laid out, they may be oversized, undersized, crimped. A lot of duct systems are pretty badly installed and wouldn't serve you well to keep them. On the other hand, if it's not really that big a deficit, it might be one of those like, yeah, it's not optimum, but it's not bad enough to be worth redoing. So, hard to say.
So the alternative to, we have a ducted home, and I don't think it's very well done.
Mm-hmm.
The alternative is what?
The alternative would be ripping the ducts and replacing them with new ducts, so that are probably better sized, installed with better quality, in some cases laid out differently. This is where it gets a little too specific to homes, as I was joking with somebody earlier, it's heck, we can't really do 1-800-FIX-MY-HOUSE in a short session like this. We're really just trying to kind of lay out the landscape for you. So there are a lot of it depends issues and very sort of home-specific solutions.
But seriously, the alternative to ductless would be like in-floor, floor heated, or electric baseboard, or what are you talking about when you talk about the alternative to that?
Oh, well, there's, again, mini splits can be ducted or ductless, and a standard heat pump would be ducted.
What does ductless mean?
It means typically, so for example, you see, let's see if I can make this point and not, okay. This is a ductless mini split where there's a cassette that basically pops through a wall and is visible in the house, and that'll blow air from that location. And so those have to be connected. This one may actually have a duct, it looks like it does, but it's designed like a ductless, where they typically go through an exterior wall or sometimes a ceiling or plenum of some sort. But it's a fairly direct route, and so they're most suitable in a relatively small space where it's hard to do the ducts. Okay, one more question on this, then we're gonna move along. So back here.
I just wanted to clarify that Mitsubishi makes a unit where you go replace your furnace and use your existing ducts.
Well, there are many units where you can reuse your existing ducts. It's just a question of whether it's in your interest to do so or not from a performance perspective. And when I say performance, I mean the delivered efficiency, which is different from the efficiency of the equipment per se, and the comfort delivered too, right? So, okay, anyway, so there's the high level and a few little details, nitty-gritty details on the space heating. On water heating, again, we have heat pump water heaters, and the Sandin is an example of a heat pump water heater. The Sandin is unique in that it's a CO2 refrigerant as opposed to an HCFC refrigerant. So it's the most benign in terms of the refrigerant itself. There is a wide range of heat pump water heaters presently on the market where the refrigerants are potentially, let's just say they're an issue we're going to have to cope with, because how many of you are familiar with drawdown? So quite a few, and you probably know that refrigerants have been brought up as in drawdown and certainly in other circles as one of our emissions issues. And so virtually all, barring Sandin and a few other minor exceptions, anything that has a refrigerant cycle has a refrigerant. Most of them have emissions associated with them, so somewhere in the life cycle. That said, the climate benefits of heat pump water heaters far outweigh the climate costs, like so many things in life, right? It's like, well, nothing's perfect, even your brand new electric vehicle has an emissions cost associated with its manufacture, for example. So this is the sort of thing that we deal with. At any rate, so your options for electric water heating are, as I said, a heat pump water heater of whatever variety, or a tankless electric water heater. The trade-offs are, mostly, I think the most important one from my perspective is the space requirement. So the tankless units are compact for the most part. However, they're not as efficient by far. So the most efficient tankless unit is going to be close to 100% efficient. That sounds like, can it really get much better? The cool thing about the refrigerant cycle, the magic of refrigerants is, and the compression, is you get 300% or sometimes more efficient with those, which really is magic. You know, the things that we have in science that we can explain, those we call science. The things that we can't yet explain very well, we call magic. And for some of us who once upon a time could maybe articulate the refrigerant cycle, I would still call it magic because I still can't explain it all that well. But obviously it's a technology we use every day. Yes?
Is the heat pump water heater instant? And what's the
No.
capacity it can provide?
Yeah, so no, the heat pump water heaters are not instantaneous, nor are tankless water heaters, by the way. That's a common sort of term switch, and I like to try to eradicate the term instantaneous water heater because it's pretty darn quick if that tankless unit is very close to the place you're calling for the hot water. If it's not, it isn't really all that much quicker than a tank unit. And what was your second question? Oh, capacity. So the tank units, the heat pump water heaters, are very similar to other tank water heaters. So you might have 50, 60, 80 gallon tank. In terms of capacity compared to what you might be accustomed to, there is a recommendation to get a somewhat larger unit because there is a little bit slower recovery. So in other words, if you were to completely drain down a heat pump water heater and people still needed more hot water for showers or whatever, then you might be disappointed because it's not gonna produce more hot water as fast as a conventional tank water heater. So for example, if you might have bought a 50 gallon, maybe you'll get an 80 gallon. So, but it's, you know, that issue in particular is not a huge cost factor, yes.
I like to point out there's an opportunity to sort of put on it, we shouldn't be taking endless hot showers and wasting lots of water. So what I've found is when you use low flow shower heads, not these gushing all over the place shower heads, and you just take shorter showers.
I'm sure
And
we
it's
all needed
perfectly
that
fine.
homily. It was funny because I was staying with a friend for 2 nights this week who have a teenage son.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Oh, yes, I have one who's barely out of his teens myself, and I grinned to myself. So was it the other evening, he came in after sports, had a 15-minute shower, and I thought, oh, good, then the shower will be mine tomorrow morning. Wrong.
No.
There was another 15-minute shower the next morning, so I thought, But then I thought, okay, I remember when my son was in that stage, it doesn't last forever, yes.
So when it says 300%, that's over a conventional gas water heater or
It's
electric?
300% period. In other words, for every 1 unit of energy that goes in to produce hot water, it produces the equivalent of 3 units of energy in hot water. So I know, but that's, again, that's the magic of the refrigerant cycle. And so, for example, the most efficient tankless, if it were 100%, yes, it would be 3 times more efficient. In reality, you won't get a tankless to 100, you might get it in the 90s. So it'll be probably better than 3 times more efficient. One more over here.
Is the heat pump water heater, does that chill its surrounding area?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that. So and I talked about space constraints. So not just the size of the unit, but the heat pump water heater requires more space around it than a conventional tank water heater. So in terms of electrifying existing homes, it's something that you would want to research. You know, how much space is it going to need, and do I have that space available? And secondly, yeah, the part of that magic that I refer to, the refrigerant cycle, is It heats the water by extracting the heat from the water heater's surroundings and rejecting the cold into the surroundings. So you generally don't want to have it too close to someplace that's going to cause a comfort issue. And also, if you're in a heating-dominated climate, which most of us are, you may not want to have it within living space. So those are a couple of the space considerations. So, and again, this is kind of like the space heatings and cooling question. You know, I can't resolve individual situations here and now, just kind of want to flag the issues so you kind of know what questions to ask going forward. One more over here and then I'll come back to you.
Is the heat pump water heater more noisy than a conventional?
That is a great question. I haven't experienced that, but I haven't been near one that's very close to the space. You say you,
Yes.
it is noisier? Okay, so that's another reason it needs a little more space probably.
You can look up the
Yeah, they do make more noise.
Sorry?
They do make more noise.
Okay.
Electric water heaters are almost perfectly quiet, and gas doesn't make much noise at all.
Uh-huh. Except sometimes you hear when they go
Right.
fire up,
But the heat pump is whenever it's creating its heat, it's
Uh-huh.
actually running a motor in there.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's very helpful. There was one more question over here. No, okay. All right, and again, you can see the splits in price. So at the high end, not that different. At the low end, pretty different. So if you needed a little tiny tankless unit, you would probably do a lot better just from a pure dollars up front perspective with a tankless. If you have a more ample budget and you're interested in savings over the lifespan through utility bills, then it's probably a more equal sort of setup. Also, this number is the most important one here, I think, that right now, because this is so much more efficient than every other option, as well as being clean emissions, there is up to $6,000 rebate if you're in the city of San Jose. So you'd be basically getting it for free. And that includes, I believe, both the equipment and labor for installation. So very attractive. Yes?
Sorry, that is not for free. I got some quotes, it's significantly above the rebate amount.
Yeah, so,
Real quotes is not
Uh-huh.
rebate. Well, I think the message saying is for free might not be exactly the reality.
well, I said maybe. Depends. And of course, these are just averages. You know, it's like I obviously wasn't able to get every price everywhere in the market. Yeah, for every house, right? Every installation situation. So no, your mileage may vary. Right, MPG is it? Oh, they seem
It's
to
just,
just wake it up a little bit.
They click faster.
Yeah, right, I know. I was gonna say something else about that. Oh, and that is, one thing to be very aware of is that anytime in the building industry, we're dealing with a change from standard practice, and that's pretty much true of everything we're talking about in this room today. The practitioners who do not have experience with these practices very, very, very frequently will pad their bids to account for their own lack of familiarity. And so it's really, you're laughing, you have experience with this? Oh, okay, so you know all about what I'm talking about. Yeah, and so it's really, they're protecting themselves from the unknown. But what it means is it's really, really in your interest to seek out the professionals who do have the experience with these technologies and practices, as opposed to those who maybe just are being introduced to selling and installing heat pump water heaters and don't have a real track record of doing it. So I have a question up here and then in the back.
Does this take 120 volts or 2?
I don't know the answer to that. Thank you.
So you
See,
have-
I love being in a room where people know more than I do about some subjects.
Does the rebate include the installation? Or the installation 220 to that?
There's a little bit more detail on the rebate later. I do not work for the city of San Jose, so I'm not intimately familiar with the ins and outs of the rebates, but that's why we brought, well, there's some other links for you later in the slide deck. And by the way, if you signed up, you will get the slide deck with all the links. Question in the back.
I just wanted to make a comment that one of the big expenses for people who are switching from a gas-fired hot water heater to a heat pump hot water heater is installing a 240 electrical thing, because most people don't have it except maybe for their gas dryer or their dryer. So that tends to be a big chunk, because you may even end up having to upgrade your panels, so.
Well, the panel we talk about a little bit later. I'm glad you raised that about the 240 plug. And I think, again, that's why the rebate is as high as it is to help address the installation costs as well as the equipment. Because the equipment alone typically will not hit that price mark. So it's there to make it as painless as possible. Okay, I'm moving on. Okay, induction cooking. How many of you will have your gas stove pried from your dying fingers? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you're being candid. So I'm here to change your mind. Okay, so I think the first thing to think. Oh, thank you. Okay, you're waving my scepter here too royally. The first thing to think about induction cooking is just erase the notion. It's like, oh, she wants me to buy an electric stove. I hate electric stoves. You know what? Your gas range plugs into the wall too. It's really not about the fact that it's electric. It's a magnetic technology, and so it's not like any other gas stove or electric stove that you've ever cooked on and hated. And most of us have that experience, right? Who's cooked on an electric stove and hated it? Yeah. If you haven't cooked, you don't get to vote. Yeah, okay. Love it, love it. How many other testimonials do we have in the room? Yes, right, we love our induction ranges. Is that a question or a testimonial?
No, that's more.
I'm a fancy private chef, and I'm an appliance whisperer, and you couldn't rip my induction out of my hand. And whether you're cooking Indian food, whether you're cooking Asian food.
Stand up.
Yeah, it's the most badass technology there is. It's so amazing. It is my passion to get people who are doubters to fall deeply in love, and it's changed so much. Both of my clients have super gas ranges, and I'm always so disappointed when I see these big honking dumb ranges. But I don't tell them that, and we use the other electrical equipment, so.
Awesome.
So how do they handle like the curved bases, the walks?
The walks? Well, there's some really interesting, do you have walk experience that you'd like to speak to?
There's some amazing big, I have a huge legit walk. It's flat bottom, but it's a for real, amazing iron walk, and there's some gorgeous high temp walks that are beautiful on flat surfaces. I'll cook with you if you want. And same with making chapatis and everything. There's so many ways to do it.
How do you do tortillas?
Super high cast iron heat, or you've got broilers. Broilers rock.
Awesome.
A lot of inductive ranges have the ability to bind two range units
Right.
together, and then you can put an iron grill on top of that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what ours does, where you can have them both fire at the same time. I have yet to buy my new grill pan. Oh, and you were asking about cookware earlier too, and I didn't quite get around to that. So I have friends, I proselytize on this subject frequently, as you might imagine. I'm the less than 3-month owner of an induction range. I'm totally in love with it.
Yeah.
And so people say, oh, but I'm gonna have to buy new cookware. It's like, so what? Okay, right, I paid $2,500 for the stove, another $160 for the pans. So what? Right? I mean, it's just not a big deal in comparison to the cost of the stove. And besides, my old pots and pans were kind of a ragtag collection, some of which I'd had since college. So I think I'm a grown-up, I get to have new pots and pans. I don't know about you, I can only speak for myself. But they're very easy to come by now. In fact, if you go into any major retailer that sells cookware, many of the sets now are labeled suitable for induction cooking. They've even developed a new symbol, sort of a wavy pattern to indicate, rapid visual recognition for the cookware that is suitable. Cast iron, again, rocks. Le Creuset and things like that are wonderful on induction. So, people who have old cast iron, it's gonna be awesome. So the cookware thing really is not as big a deal as it might be. I'm gonna probably have to move a little faster to zoom through some of this material. So now you have your cards. I'm gonna ask you to put your questions on your cards henceforth, because otherwise we'll only cover like a third of the material. So this is probably the most important part though. So it's easier to go faster on the rest. I do want to say a little bit more about the cleaner, safer, better control, cooler, etc. Because again, I think this is a really important point for persuasion why you would want to switch. Hang on one second here. So cleaner. My husband does a lot of the cooking in our house, and he has a very liberal hand with the olive oil. This is about a tablespoon, right? No, that's more like a half a cup. Well, so most of that ends up like all over the cooked surface. He's not real aces on cleanup, so I hated cleaning up the old gas range, and now it's like, done. Gotta love that, okay. Safer, very important. How many of you have people in your household ever who are a little forgetful? Okay. How many have people in your household occasionally who are maybe elderly? How about young? Sometimes. Okay, so there are all kinds of vulnerable groups, including those of us who have been known to be forgetful, who can be at risk from burners left on, open flame, burning a pot that turns into more of a fire. We know plenty of lucid people in our circle of acquaintance who have had house fire experiences because of that. So that's way, way less likely to happen with an induction range, because the minute you remove the pot, there's no more movement of heat. And that's because the magnetic technology activates the ferrous metal in the pan, not the cooktop itself. The cooktop will warm, but it's really from conduction from the pan. And so once you remove the pan, that cooktop will cool off quite rapidly. So it's very, very difficult to have the type of burn episodes or fires that you do. And if you leave, a piece of newspaper, a recipe card, whatever, a dish towel that's laying over the stovetop, you're not gonna have that ignite. I mean, I suppose you could if you sandwiched it between the pan and the burner while it was cooking. That's not so likely to happen. So there are a lot of risk factors that are enormously reduced. And then the fact that you're reducing the combustion from the range itself is also huge. Anybody here suffer from asthma or other respiratory challenges or have family members who do? So there are a few of you. And this is more and more common. Asthma is epidemic in this country. And cooking or any kind of fossil fuel combustion in the home releases both nitrous oxide and formaldehyde, which are serious respiratory irritants. So it's not good for us to have these toxic substances in our homes. So the safety features are really, really important, and I think not well understood. So I want to really encourage you to delve into those topics. Better control, so there's very fine-grained control on them. And again, cooler. The cooler part is, I think, most important in commercial kitchens, where the heat for the cooks can be a real liability. Not so much here, although in summer, most of us don't really want to spend a lot of time cooking. Yes?
One more testimonial. You can boil water and nothing's flat.
Oh, that's true.
It's incredible. It's far faster
Yeah.
than any gas or electric range I've ever had.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Okay, so care with defibrillators and pacemakers. Thank you. There's some great research on all this online. Consumer Reports has done some good write-ups on induction. There are many, there's a ton of media in the last 6 months on induction. So, oh yes, and you can check out a portable unit from the city, try it out for free with cookware for up to 2 weeks. So you can do the scratch and sniff for yourself. Okay, electric clothes dryers. This is the simplest one of all. Most people really don't have any emotional attachment to what fuel gets their clothes dry. So the main choice here is, again, a heat pump. So heat pumps are obviously the technology of the day versus a standard electric dryer. So the downside for heat pump dryers is they do have a much longer drying time. There are some stacking units that are pretty nifty. There are also some combo units, washer dryers together, so you can put a load in and it'll go through the whole cycle. So there's that can be an advantage. They don't tend to be really large capacity, so there's some definite trade-offs in the options to consider here. But either way, you know, honestly, I have to say that in our new home, all new appliances, I got a standard electric because A, I dry most of my clothes on a clothesline, and B, the washer does such a good job of removing the water that the dry cycle time when I do use it is pretty short. But these are all trade-offs I think everybody just has to make for themselves. Okay, fireplaces, again, these are perhaps second only to cooking. The other one that has a sort of an emotional issue attached to it, that some people say, I really love the fire experience. I'm like, great, take it outside. That's my favorite option. But there are more and more electric fireplace options that are amazingly realistic looking. So you can really have that sort of flickering kind of elemental magic in your house and not have it pollute the environment. Similar options, there are also some electric barbecues I recently ran across, some other options. But, and if you must have like charcoal or whatever, at least, again, do it outside, don't pipe it so that we can avoid some of the natural gas infrastructure. Pools and hot tubs. People here have pools and hot tubs they want to hear about. We got one. You know what? I'm going to skip over this. We can talk about it later too because we do need to move faster. But there's more information here, some good links. So I'm just going to really direct you to those links for more in-depth information. Okay, so making the transition plan, we'll kind of zoom. What I've done is I've put these steps. You could argue whether these are the right order or not. I think this is sort of the easy order to do these in. The first one is replacing dated electric devices. I was talking to Robert earlier. He said, yeah, we just right off the bat changed out all our lights to LED. And by the way, for those of you who haven't been following LED technology, that is a technology that has, I would say, come late to market, but grown so fast and matured so well over the last few years that if the last time you looked at LEDs was even 2 years ago, have another look because there's so much more available now. It's much more affordable than it was, way better light quality, light options, just vastly improved place from where it was a couple years ago. So, and then the main thing I'm going to point you to here also is these resources. My favorite is enerv.com, this one here, because you get a ton of information, not just for lighting, but for appliances, all kinds of things, household electronics, office electronics. They keep that website really, really up to date, and you get information on operating costs, purchase price, and it's a real simple rating system. It's numeric 0 to 100. I usually say, look, and you can use things like, how much space do you have available? You can put the dimensions in, say, I need a replacement fridge or whatever, you know, the object is. You put it in there. And you'll come up with options. And I usually say search for something, anything with a score of 90 or better. If you still don't find what you want, well, you can bump it down to 85 or whatever. But really, really good resource. Okay, second step, improving the building enclosure. So a lot of people have leaky houses. Really, really common because almost any house built before very recently by a very, very conscientious builder will have a leaky house, because that is the sad but realistic industry norm. So, and one of the tricks is when we're changing out heating and cooling systems, ideally we want to reduce the work that those systems have to do before we replace them, because then we can replace them with smaller systems that are less expensive. So if you can, I would really encourage you to improve the building enclosure. And so there are a number of variables involved in that. Air sealing, gaps, upgrading insulation. You can do walls sometimes it's a royal pain in the neck, but at a minimum, doing attics and below floors is usually not so painful. If you still have single pane windows, it's time for them to go bye-bye. And adding shading devices on especially west facades can be really beneficial in reducing the cooling loads and overheating. Secondly, again, a little bit more about windows. I've got some window metrics here. The most important ones are U factor, which is a thermal performance, and then solar heat gain coefficient, which is how well it protects you from excess heat gain. So a little bit more about that. Okay, number 3, if you're getting ready to do some of the things in number 4, which won't be surprising, you're gonna have to look at whether your existing electric service panel has sufficient capacity. So that's something you really wanna find out. And there are a number of things you might be adding, including electric vehicle charger, photovoltaics. So it's good to kind of look at your whole plan, whether or not you're gonna do it all at once, and then get the panel done.
Sorry, what is photovoltaics?
Sorry?
What is the?
Photovoltaics is solar electricity. Yeah, but as opposed to solar hot water panels, solar electricity panels. Okay, so, we've already talked about these things in quite a bit of detail, so I think we can just jump through these. And again, you'll have the slide deck for reference. Make sure your equipment's properly sized, very important. And I can't emphasize enough what I said earlier, and I know some of you have come in since then. Most trades professionals don't have much experience with high performance homes, with zero carbon, with high levels of efficiency, above code levels of efficiency. Really do your due diligence in locating the designers and contractors who have that experience to make sure you get the best outcomes.
The ones that don't will try to talk you out of a lot of them.
Yeah, they'll try and talk you out of them and or charge you exorbitant prices for them because they don't really want to do it. All right, so this is just a little bit of extra on some of the things you might be thinking about. You don't have to have solar on site. You can actually get it through San Jose Clean Energy's Total Green Plan. We've got several links. Can't take questions right now, sorry. I've got one minute left, which I'm obviously gonna go over a little bit. So I think the thing in planning this is to figure out when your equipment is going to fail. And this is something we don't do very well in our culture. We wait until it does fail, and then we're sort of stuck with whatever the tradesperson we call happens to have in their warehouse or on the back of their truck. If we plan ahead and replace preemptively, we can do a much better job with the results that we get. So also important to think about what things that if you do them at the same time may have beneficial synergies, also in terms of cost. So, and then getting it done. Here's just very briefly a snapshot. Again, these are numbers. The reds are things that are gonna cost you. The greens are things you're gonna save under these different scenarios. This is a really important thing to say. Again, your mileage may vary. These are very general numbers from a study that was done for the state of California They do reference San Jose area specifically, but not every house is the same, and not every starting situation is the same. I think the main takeaway here is that the heat pump for heating and cooling, replacing a gas furnace plus air conditioner, is actually the most attractive upfront financially, as well as operationally. So these other things aren't necessarily going to be immediately attractive in terms of the economics. However, as I said, we are in a shifting landscape, and those economics will be changing for the better for those who electrify in the years to come. Okay, so these are, I think, important keys. If you're working with architects and or builders, some tips here, some links to resources with a lot more detail on how you might navigate the process successfully. And some links, you'll have the slides, you'll have the links to the incentive programs, the induction cooking, the clean energy, all of these, and then Rising Sun. Tanya, are you gonna talk about this? Did Tanya? Yes, there you are. I thought I saw your face, and then you did. So she'll be up here in a minute to say a little bit more about some of the BayREN programs, and there's some more upcoming events, and there we go. We're done. Thank you.
Because we incorporated questions during the presentation, I'm going to let Tanya speak first, and then if we have a few minutes after, we can do those last few questions. But yeah, thank you. If you have any more questions about this, please visit the Climate Smart table, which is upstairs. As Anne mentioned, the city is offering up to $6,000 in rebates for a heat pump water heater, and you can also check out portable induction cooktop and cookware. Oh, thank you. Free for up to 2 weeks. Now I'm going to introduce Tanya Veach from the County of Santa Clara to give a 2-minute talk about the BayREN Home and Rebate Program. So let's give her a round of applause for that.
So this is going to be really quick. My name is Tanya Veach. I work for the County of Santa Clara Office of Sustainability, and one of the programs that we support is the BayREN program, which is the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. You can see some of the details here on the screen, but we're also here tabling, so feel free to come and stop by our table. It's the BayREN table. We have some freebies and giveaways, but in a nutshell, BayREN, we have a couple different programs. One that I think that would be most useful for you is we have rebates for single-family homeowners as well as for multifamily owners, and we have a new small and medium business program as well. So what I want to just highlight really quickly is for our single-family homeowners, we have rebates ranging from about $200 all the way up to $5,000 that you can have a variety of measures. It's a single measure program, so if you just want to do insulation, we have a rebate for that. How do you qualify? As long as you're a PG&E or Silicon Valley or San Jose Clean Energy ratepayer, you can qualify. You also have to use one of our awesome participating contractors, and throughout the Bay Area, we have about 100 to choose from. So really great vetted quality contractors. We do routine checks. One of the things I want to mention is that through this program, you have access to our energy advisors, which is a free service. They can recommend you to the BayREN program, help you walk through every single part of that journey if you're looking towards energy efficiency, but they're also a great resource because they can refer you to complementary programs. So they're third-party, non-biased. They're not only trying to get you into BayREN, they're trying to really help you on your energy as well as water efficiency journey. So feel free to call them. The number I don't believe is on the screen, but if you visit the BayREN table, we have that information in this little trifold. So again, I would refer you to the energy advisors. We have also a couple partners who are also tabling here today, which is Rising Sun Center for Opportunity as well as Elements. For Rising Sun, they do an awesome program that will be until the end of this month called the Green House Calls. It's a no-cost, free service where 2 youth energy advisors between the ages of about 16 and 25 will come to your home and do a quick water and energy audit, as well as replace all of the measures that they can. So in terms of switching out your light bulbs to LEDs, providing you with faucet aerators, shower heads, as well as a smart power strip. So that opportunity is here, and again, only available until the end of this month. And we also have another program called the Home Energy Score, lots of information information. A $200 rebate that can help rate your home between a 1 and 10 scale to figure out how efficient is your home. So 1, your home, a rating of 1 would be your home is like really inefficient, all the way to 10 being your home is super efficient, but then you can also get customized report to help you increase your home's journey through that to get closer to 10. So a lot of information to cover in a quick 2 minutes, and I probably went over that. Again, contact our home energy advisors, visit our Bay Run table, and we have lots of collateral to be able to share with you. So with that, thank you for coming here today, and I appreciate your time. But I will hand it over to Ann, because I don't know if we're officially done. Thank you.